Welcome to Success Weekly with James Tharris, a weekly dose of thought-provoking ideas and helpful tips on improving your mindset. And now, here's your host, James Tharris.
Welcome to another episode of Success Weekly, where each week we attempt to put a piece of the puzzle together in how to become more successful. And this week we're going to be talking about work ethic. Work ethic is definitely a large part of success, because without it, it's really difficult to do anything. You know, and here's the thing I've learned over the course of my life, that many of my failures, many of the times where I lost, the times where I was average, I could directly I could directly point to the fact that my work ethic wasn't where it should have been. I was basically being lazy. I'm still very lazy, by the way, but I've learned how to harness this work ethic. And I'm getting close to 50 years old now, so it's becoming more and more important at this particular time in my life than I ever thought it would be in the past. A lot of my friends of my age are thinking about retiring and slowing down. And that's a good thing for me in the martial arts business, because I'm preparing to open up a school here in Palm Harbor, Florida. We have a very successful location that's been operating for 22 plus years in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I made the decision to come down in January of this year and start preparing to open up our Palm Harbor location, Palm Harbor, Florida, which is just a little bit north of Tampa. And I was at first a little bit nervous about it, because there are a lot of successful schools that have been operating for many, many years right in the same area that I'm at. But as I started researching some of the schools, I noticed that the school owners, a lot of them were my age or in some cases older. And I've talked to a lot of school owners, in this age range. And in fact, I'm one of these school owners in this age range. So I know what they're thinking. I know that a lot of them are relying on others to run their business for them, or they've turned it more into a hobby for them. They've lost a lot of their desire and really care about growing their business. And that's great news for me, because my work ethic, although I'm a very lazy person, I've got a great work ethic when I need to have one, and when I've got the discipline to see it through when it needs to be seen through. So that's basically what I'm doing right now, is doing all of this work that most of the people my age wouldn't be willing to do. And that's what work ethic's all about. And so there's an old saying that says successful people are willing to do what failures or unsuccessful people are unwilling to do. And really that speaks to your work ethic in a lot of ways. It speaks to confidence as well, having that gung-ho attitude and things that I've talked about in the past. But in a lot of regards, it applies to your work ethic. What is your attitude towards work? Do you have the attitude towards work that that's not my job, or I don't get paid enough to do that, or I don't get paid to do that thing? Well, that's what I'm talking about here. You see, a work ethic can propel you to the pinnacles of success, or it can keep you mediocre or underneath that. And if you're not willing to do the work, then you can't expect to have the reward. I don't know. I think the old saying is that the only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary. And that's an absolutely true statement. So I want you to really think about work ethic and how it applies to your own successes. If you look back to your own failures or your own periods of time where you were really kind of just kind of sliding along laterally, not really accomplishing much, I think you'll be able to pinpoint the culprit being your work ethic. And it's the same thing with people that go to a gym and they either work their muscles or they work their mouths. I've been at the gym many times, and I've seen people stand around a machine or sitting on a machine, and they'll have a 20 or 30 minute conversation with somebody else who's standing next to another machine, or maybe they're sitting on the machine, and there's no real work getting done. They just like the ability to say that they go to the gym every day. And that's the reason why a lot of times you don't see any change in their physique, because their work ethic is not, at least their physical work ethic is not where it needs to be. And that's the reason they're not getting the results that they need to get. And then in the very same gym, you'll see other people that seldom say a word to anybody. And a lot of times they're in great shape because they're there to work. They're not there to talk. I like to be a little bit of both of those people. I like to find somebody that I enjoy speaking with, but I don't speak with them in lieu of getting a workout in. I'll do that usually when it's time for the sauna, or changing clothes. So I'm a social person at a gym, but when it's time to work, I'm there to work, and that's what I do. So really, if you think about work ethic, it's one of the big keys to becoming more successful. I really don't have much more to say about the topic than that, except for, maybe I'll tell you a quick story or two that relates to work ethic in my own life that really help to encapsulate the idea of work ethic. And one of them, former life, I was a professional disc jockey, and I worked. I started out at the Columbia School of Broadcasting. Actually, further back, I started out as a neighborhood block DJ. And I did a lot of mixing and scratching and playing music in apartment complexes and things in their clubhouses and whatnot. And I had a lot of fun doing that. But I wanted to turn that into a profession. And I knew that wasn't going to really get me there by doing these little, tiny jobs, although they were really helpful in the long run. So I went to the Columbia School of Broadcasting, and got my degree there. And I went to work in radio at a station called WIBC Radio, which was an AM station, AM 1070 in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I worked along a guy named Bob Lamey, who's the voice of the Colts, and Jerry Pigeon and Jeff Pigeon and some of these other high-profile AM DJs. And I learned a lot from these guys. But what I had to do, I didn't enjoy. I did a lot of things that I wanted to be on the air, and I really had to do a lot of things behind the scenes. So I really got disenfranchised with the whole radio idea. And I went to work for a company that did mobile disc jockey work, where I could be in front of people and I could get immediate gratification and feedback from what was going on in the audience there. And I learned a lot of things about the business of being a disc jockey and public speaking from that profession. And it wasn't long before the company that hired me brought me on as an associate and gave me the powers of hiring and firing and training new employees. And at that time, I was working I was doing college parties and wedding receptions and birthday parties and all types of different things. And our company started to get hired on to some nightclubs. And there was a nightclub on the north side called Whirligigs inside the Radisson Hotel, which I believe the Radisson Hotel is no longer there. And to make a long story short with that, the nightclub that I worked in for probably 4 or 5 years suddenly closed up and became a banquet hall. But that's another story. That's kind of what propelled me into my martial arts career, actually. But back at that time, I remember getting hired on at this nightclub, which then meant that I was going to be working there 5 or 6 nights a week. Actually, it was 6 nights a week, Monday through Saturday. And of course, Friday and Saturdays being the biggest 2 days of those. And so, unfortunately, a lot of weddings and parties and things like that happened on Fridays and Saturdays as well. So I was left to find a replacement for myself to work at the nightclub on Friday nights. Now, for several Fridays and Saturday nights, I worked at this club, and so they got to know me, and that's part of the reason why I got hired on there, because of my abilities to read a crowd and to be able to get a dance floor packed and know when to slow things down and how to make announcements for the bartenders and the drink specials and things like that. And when it came time for me to hire a replacement to replace me on nights that I couldn't be there, I thought that everybody had the same kind of work ethic I did. I thought everybody knew the things that I did, and so I hired people that I thought would be a great fit, only to find out when I would return from doing one of my wedding receptions or something like that this person basically did nothing. They played the music that they liked instead of the music that the crowd wanted to hear. They never slowed the music down, or they never sped the music up at the right times. They never made the announcements for the drink specials and things like this. And they really took no time to learn about being a DJ. They just thought that playing music and loving music was what was required to be a DJ. And I had to fire a lot of these guys because they just didn't have the work ethic. And I came to learn that that's what it was all based around. So that's one area that I really learned about work ethic and lack of work ethic by a lot of other people. And again, actually, I'll give you a third one here. So the second one is I worked as a manager at a McDonald's, and it was a very short period of time. And actually, the reason I worked at this McDonald's was because this nightclub that I began working at closed up, and I was left with about a week's notice to get a job. And I applied as many places as I could, and I wasn't getting any calls. So I walked into this McDonald's way up on the north side. At the time, I lived on the south side, and I was so ashamed of even thinking about a McDonald's that I went as far away as I could go. And I went up to Carmel in Indiana, thinking that it would be a nicer place at least. And I walked in to talk about employment there, and they immediately hired me on the spot as a manager because they could tell that I had some professional experience and I had the abilities through my martial arts training to lead others. And they hired me on to management. And so as I became a manager there, I started to really be able to see the differences in work ethic. And people who didn't want to become managers, they were asked about management positions. They didn't want to be managers because it meant that they would have to work harder and for not much more money. And so that was something I really realized in all the employees. There were very, very few people that actually came there to really ascend the ladder and to work hard. Most people came to get a paycheck and some free food along the way. So that was the second story. The third story relates to my martial arts training. And I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but I competed for 20-some years as a martial arts competitor. For the first 9 years, the first 8 years, I competed with absolutely zero results. No first places, no second places, no third places. And fortunately for me, back then, they had no such thing as participation trophies or medals. Thank goodness for that. So I did a lot of losing. And when I got to the point where I got very fed up with losing and spending all this money and this time traveling to these competitions, I started to try to figure out what was I doing wrong. Why wasn't I placing better? Why wasn't I placing at all? And I had to look around at the competitors. I started looking, first of all, at the people who were taking these huge grand champion trophies, the big 6-foot tall ones. And I watched as they entered the competition arena. I watched what they did. And I noticed that most of them weren't sitting around jaw-jacking with their fellow students and friends. They had earphones in to prevent them from being distracted. They were listening to inspiring music, and they were practicing, they were training, they were visualizing, they were working on things that they were going to be doing later in the day, and they weren't letting a minute go to waste. So that was the first thing I noticed. And I started to get around these guys and started to ask them about their training regimen. And what I came to realize when they started giving me their advice and their training regimen was that I was doing like 1/16 of that, which was the reason why I wasn't placing. So I went back to my school and started to really train, and in many cases I started setting the pace for the class. And then it wasn't long before I got my first third place trophy. This was after 8 years, by the way, so I'm talking about the 8 years plus. And then it wasn't long before I started taking second places and then first places, and then finally taking my first grand champion trophy. And I noticed that when I did that, things changed. All of a sudden, I went from being largely unnoticed by people in my school and competitors to having people mention my name as I walked in, and they would say, "There's that guy. There he is. There's the guy that won the last competition." And then I would get 3 or 4 people to come over every tournament and ask me the things that I was asking of the other competitors. And they were hoping to find the little key to success as well. And it largely came down to the work ethic. That was the one thing that I really tried to espouse to the people when they asked for advice was I would question, how much are you working? How many times a week are you going to class? Are you going to class once or twice a week? Or are you there every day? You see, if you're going to be a champion, you're going to be there every day. You're going to be there as often as you possibly can. You're going to show up early. You're going to put all you've got into that class, and you're going to stay after and continue working a little bit further. See, that's what work ethic is all about. It's about doing those things that other people are unwilling to do. And if you're not experiencing much success in your life, or you're experiencing mediocrity, I challenge you to look at your work ethic. Look at what you do on a day-to-day basis. How much work are you putting in towards that thing that you want? Whatever it is. Are you trying to save money for a new house? Well, how much diligence are you putting forth into saving money and putting it into savings and paying attention to it on a day-to-day basis? Or are you just hoping that you get this big windfall by playing lottery tickets, scratch-off tickets, and hoping for some big pie in the sky pipe dream that may or may not ever come? Or are you hoping for some kind of inheritance from Aunt May when she passes? Those are pipe dreams, guys. You've got to learn to put your work ethic to use, and that's what's going to propel you to the success that you want to see in your life. It's all designed around your work ethic. Now, there's a lot more to success than just your work ethic, but it is certainly a piece of the pie, a piece of the puzzle. And I encourage you to as a call to action this week, is to sit down and just spend a few minutes reflecting upon your work ethic as it relates to the things that are most important to you. If you've got goals in your career, maybe your goal is you want to become a supervisor or a manager. Maybe your goal is you want to become a district manager or the CEO of a corporation. Maybe your goal is you want to own your own business, whether it be a small time mom and pop shop type of business that's only open a few days a week, to a full-blown, franchise business that's all around the United States. It doesn't matter. Whatever your goals and aspirations are, you've got to be willing to put work behind them. There was a book that came out, I think it was 2006 or 2007, accompanied by a video, and it was called The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. And by the way, it's something I highly recommend you get your hands on. It was a fantastic, motivational, uplifting piece of work by this young lady, and had a lot of guests in it as well. But there was one key ingredient that was missing. See, it's all about the law of attraction and then attracting into your life the things that you want to have. But what it left out was the work ethic part. It never talked about, in order to realize your dreams, you've got to attract things into your life. But how do you attract these things? You think about them and you write affirmations and things, and yes, those are all beneficial. But you've got to put your hand to the grindstone. You've got to get in there and do the work. That's really the only way you're going to attract the things into your life you're looking to attract. As I mentioned a moment ago, I didn't begin attracting people to me that wanted to become more successful until I first became more successful. Isn't that funny how that works? So they say, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I think it's the chicken. I think that a chicken is what lays the egg, and then the egg hatches and it produces another chicken. That's just my own personal opinion on that. So it's basically work ethic. The chicken doesn't come before the work. The work of the chicken pushing that egg out, that's the work. And then, the baby chicken is born. After the mother hen sits on it and works a little bit more to keep it warm, that's, again, more work. Then the chicken hatches. Otherwise, they a lot of times end up in their grocery store freezer and refrigerator, and then they end up as breakfast for us. So it's about work ethic. And speaking of, there's work ethic and commitment are kind of like intertwined. And there's an old joke about breakfast and the pig. The pig and the what's the difference between the pig and the chicken? Ham and eggs. Well, the chicken is involved, but the pig is committed. So if you let that sink in for a moment, I think you'll get the gist of that story. But again, that goes to speak towards work ethic. It's kind of a commitment to what you want to see happen in your life, and then backing it up with tremendous action. And that's my call to action for you. Is two pieces. Number one, sit down and give yourself a little time to reflect upon your work ethic. And if it's your diet and exercise program, delve into the reasons you're not getting the results. And I think you'll find that it's because you're being lazy. You're not doing the things you need to be doing. It takes that work ethic. And the second thing is to come up with an actual plan that you can work. So there are, in this day and age, it's the information age. There's no shortage of information for us. And there are plans that are written out, and you can find them anywhere about virtually anything. So I encourage you to look for something like that in regards to your diet and exercise program. There are many diets out there. Depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're looking to accomplish, gaining weight and muscle, then go find somebody who's done that already and find out what they're doing for their diet. And you're probably going to find out that they've got a mentor of their own that's guiding them and leading them, and that might be a beneficial thing for you. If it's a workout, what are you trying to accomplish with your workout? Are you trying to gain more muscle? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to lose fat? Are you trying to fit in your clothes better? Are you trying to get more stamina so you can run a little bit further, a little bit faster? Are you trying to get your heart in shape? Pinpoint what kind of a workout you want, and then start to formulate a work plan behind it. And make sure that it's not something that's overwhelming. It's something that you can start small with and build upon, little habits each and every day. And that's how you really exercise your self-discipline muscle and your work ethic muscle, is by starting small and continuing each day and then building upon that until you can do more and more and more. Just like lifting weights. You don't start out by lifting a 600-pound barbell. You start out by lifting a 20-pound barbell until it's easy enough that you can add some weight to it. Then you go to 30 pounds and so on and so forth until you get to the point where you can someday lift a 600-pound barbell. The same thing applies in every area of your life. It's the same as it's applied in my life. In my DJ business, I was so passionate about it that I was willing to do all the work necessary. I was willing to stay up until the wee hours in the morning, searching through record crates and driving through. Back then, there was no digital media, so we had to go looking for records, physical records, these big discs that you'd play on a record player. And it took a lot of time to drive across state lines and find these little obscure record stores and sit sometimes 7 or 8 hours on my behind looking through one record after another, finding the most hard to find music. And eventually I took all those records that I had amassed over years, and I opened an online record store, and I sold all of my records that way. So they actually paid me dividends. There were records that I would find in a crate in New York City after an 8-hour session of sitting on my butt looking through these crates, and I would paid for it $5 or $6 for it, and I turned around 10 years later and sold them for $75 or $150 online. That was the benefit of some of my work, and that's the benefit of how work ethic can pay off for you in the future, because it's like a bank account. You can only take out what you first put in, but when you put things into a bank account, there's something called interest that accrues as well. And so instead of taking out $1, a lot of times you take out $1.10 or $1.20, whatever the interest rate happens to be. So your life works like that as well. And there will come a time where you're going to start drawing upon the things that you put into your mental and physical work ethic bank account in the earlier parts of your life that you're going to need in later parts of your life. And so that's why it's so important that you get a handle on this whole work ethic thing. Now, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, you got something out of it, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know about a story or a couple of stories maybe that you have about how work ethic has applied in your own life. Please feel free to share, like and share this. And if there's a subject you'd like for me to talk about in the future, don't hesitate to let me know. And until next week, I'm asking you to become successful.
That's all for this week. Tune in next week for another episode of Success Weekly. Do you have an idea you'd like James to talk about in an upcoming episode? Post your comments and be sure to share this podcast with friends.